Hello and welcome to another episode of Murphy's Law. I'm Eric Murphy. With me today is a special guest, a good friend who I was super excited to see on Talk Heathen, but kind of bummed that I didn't get to be on with. Neil, the 604 Atheist. Neil, how's it going?
I am doing well, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I loved the episode that you did with V, and I'm
Thank you.
happy to have you on.
I had a great time.
Yeah, well, how was your experience? Was it what you
doing
thought
the
it
show?
would be? Yeah.
I mean, I've watched almost every single episode. All right, I'm not going to lie. I've seen every episode. But
I'm so sorry.
No. Of course, there's great episodes, and then there's good episodes, and then there's episodes that are like so-so. But that also depends on who you've got calling in, how the main guests are collaborating together. Like, you can tell when there's a little bit of tension, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But I really had a really good time, and I was impressed because a lot of times you get some callers that come in and they're quite well, for lack of a better word, they can be a little bit vitriolic, we'll say, like a Darth Dawkins type guy.
Oh yeah.
And we had some really amicable callers that day. And I was talking about that with V for a little bit after we went off air, and she was like, "Yeah," she goes, "It happens once in a while, but so it was really cool." And I was just, I wanted to be, civil, I guess we'll say, because I can be a bit of a beast when somebody's acting like a moron, but
Sure.
not that I, like calling people names or anything like that. But let's face it, sometimes you just want to pound your head up against a tree. Sometimes it's some of the ways that some of these people respond to science and reality, right? So, the one fella that phoned in who I've actually conversed with before and done messages with before, his name's Cafe. I think he called in. I can't remember what name he was using at the time, but he's going on about the DMT stuff and how, DMT can bring you to a whole new level of reality. I go, dude, no. As soon as you're on a drug that is changing the brain chemistry of your brain, it's no longer reality. So, yeah. And he's adamant about it. Oh, there's all these studies, and I'm like, that's great, but it's just not the way it works.
No. If I personally subscribe to the correspondence theory of truth. So that which that which corresponds to reality is true. And so if you were to take some of those things, that you see when you're tripping and compare that against reality, then obviously you're not going to get the same results. So it's
going to be issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
I know there are some other definitions of truth that people use that might have some wiggle room there, but no. Anyway.
Well, there was a great meme I saw a little while back. It's a picture, basically. It's got a picture of a circle and a picture of a rectangle. It says, this is a circle, this is true. This is a rectangle, this is true. But when you change the angle of the picture, it's a what do you call it? Not a cone,
like an
but
illusion, kind of, where the
right, like you turn it aside, it's like a cylinder.
Okay. And
this is the truth. Because that's actually what you're seeing. Sure, from this angle, you see a circle. From this angle, you see a rectangle. But when you look at them on the right angle, you'll see the actual truth of what it is.
So, actually,
they're both true, but that's the truth.
That is a really good kind of descriptor of the difference between epistemology and ontology.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's your epistemology, what you find to be true, what you are discovering yourself. And your toolbox that you use, you could be wrong, but what's your reasoning, right? Are you being rational in the way that you're approaching things versus the ontology of everything, the actual existence of that thing? So,
right.
Yeah. Send that over to me, man.
Yeah. I'll see if I can dig it up. It shouldn't be too hard.
Dig it.
I think you could probably I found, because I saw it posted on somebody's Facebook page, and I was like, crap, and I went through their feed, and I can't find it. So I Googled circle, rectangle, truth, and it popped up on Google Images right away. So
sounds good. Well, so I kind of want to dive into a call that y'all did.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
I want to see, do you remember this call?
Kevin, hello, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hi,
Kevin.
Do you remember Kevin?
I do.
As somebody who watches Talk Heathen? He's called in, what, 10 times?
I think that's what V said when I spoke to her about that.
Yeah. So,
or when I spoke to them,
we have a frequent flyer, and he's called in about a whole bunch of different kind of zany different ideas. And what I enjoy after the fact, it's frustrating in the moment, but after the fact, what's interesting is it feels like he's just sucks up weird conspiracies and things like it's like he's just gravitates towards them and brings them back. And the one he talked to y'all about kind of got me, and I wanted to talk to you about the subject and see kind of what you were thinking in the moment and where you went from there. So let me give you his intro to what he wanted to talk about.
I've got another theory for you out there. It has to do with the scriptures of the Bible and Jesus' life and something called the Peter principle.
Okay. The Peter principle.
Yeah, which I had never heard of.
I have, and he did not use it the way that I'm used to hearing it. So
not surprising.
Yeah, well, the Peter principle, the way I understood it, is that you will get when it comes to your working, you're going to get, you're going to get put in a position all the way up until you're incompetent. So you're going to keep getting promotions all the way up until you get put into a position that you're not very good at, and then you're going to stay there.
Right.
And so that would be the Peter principle. It had absolutely nothing to do with what he was talking about.
Right.
And
see, I'd never heard of it, so I didn't know that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, his example was one that I'd heard before, but I'd never heard it called the Peter principle.
Okay.
And so, I skipped a couple of things in that call because it was like a 40-minute call, and I don't want to go over the whole, call with you. So just kind of to speed through, V brought up, hey, you keep bringing up these different ideas, but we never go back to them. He said, after kind of talking about that for a bit, y'all settled on talking about this new subject. And he said he wants to talk about the Peter principle, and he kind of dives in by saying...
The reason why I get to this is because the word Peter was not originally the disciple's name, but it was actually Simon. But when Simon approached Jesus, he was given the name Peter because the name Peter means a rock.
I will build my church upon this rock.
Okay. So as somebody who's kind of watched before, have you come across to that idea or that kind of view before?
Not very often.
Okay.
So when he mentioned what he did there, first of all, I was thrown by the whole Peter and Simon thing. Like I had no idea that was actually a thing. I had no idea that was what he's saying, because I don't really remember us getting into whether that was a true thing or not. Was Peter's original name actually Simon in the scripture, and they changed it? Really? Mm-hmm. Okay, I had no idea.
Actually, the Apostle Paul wasn't Paul.
It was Saul or something.
His name was Saul. Yep. And then after his road to Damascus moment, his name changed to Paul. So there's kind of there's a history of that. I mean, there's precedent in other places where that happens. So I see that. But calling.
How does that work though? Does somebody give them the new name?
Well, see, I don't remember. I don't know if I don't think anybody gave themselves a new name, so I would assume so.
Somebody assigned the name, called him Peter because Peter meaning like the rock. Maybe he saw the value of Peter and said you were like a rock or something and changed his name to that.
Well, so that is actually kind of where things start breaking into a weird direction. And I feel like there are two places we can go with this. And what I'm worried about is I'm worried about running out of time because there are two big subjects. One of them is hermeneutics and exegesis, and the other is prophecy.
Right.
And so I feel like we can look at the same content through both of those filters and see totally different things.
Of course.
So the first, I think, is going to help us look at the next few clips, and that is hermeneutics. So hermeneutics is a thing. It is totally a thing. It's the process of looking back at maybe a historic text or document or something like that. And as you're reading it, as you're learning things in it, you're learning what some concepts are and then taking them back and going back over it. So I go to Spider-Man as a go-to. Like, let's say 500 years from now, we unearth a Spider-Man comic from the 80s. And as you're reading it, you don't understand the pop culture. You don't understand this. You don't understand that that's the, a picture of the president. But then as you go, he meets the president and you go, oh crap. Okay, hold on a second. Now I've got some context. So now I'm going to go back and
check it out again. Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of build that up. And so hermeneutics as a study is something that actual scholars do. The thing is biblical hermeneutics gets kind of wonky and it doesn't use the same principles. In fact, it's gone off on a path so much so that if you look up hermeneutics, you're going to see hermeneutics and then Christian hermeneutics. Because,
biblical or scriptural hermeneutics.
Yeah, because it needs its own subject because it's diverged from that core, field of study. And I learned that the hard way. I said, well, hermeneutics is BS. And they're like, no, it's not. And I looked in and I was in college at the time. I went to my philosophy professor and they're like, no, hermeneutics is a thing. So
it can be useful, but how can it be? See, the problem I have with using it for biblical or scriptural type study is, first of all, I look at these books as mythologies. So how can you use hermeneutics as something that, in my opinion, there may be some historical events, I think probably more so in the Old Testament than the New one, but there may be, how do you use hermeneutics to go back on something that, in my opinion, is fictional to begin with, right? But then you using the Spider-Man comic book answers that question, right? So you can actually, when you're looking for context in a story period, you can use it.
Absolutely. And I mean, even if it is in fiction, you're absolutely right. You can still learn things about the people who are writing it. So you get these different meta-analyses. But I
have a great example of that, by the way.
Oh yeah? What do you got?
You remember the cantina scene in Star Wars, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
When they first meet Han Solo and who shot first and all that. Well, we will get into that.
We're first introduced to jizz music.
Yeah. There's a book you can buy called Tales from the Cantina, and it talks about certain individuals that are in that scene and what they were doing before the scene, during the scene, and after the scene. So the next time you go back and watch that cantina scene, you now know what half of the people in there are doing and why they're there and what's going to happen afterwards. So that changes the dynamics of the entire scene when you've read that book.
That is cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Finding texts like that do help you kind of piece all of those things together. But here's the thing is hermeneutics cannot determine whether or not something happened.
No.
You can learn about the culture. You can learn about, a lot of different things, from that time. But hermeneutics as a field of study cannot get you to, determining whether or not an event in that story actually took place.
Right. Whether or not it's real and happened. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's value to fiction, just like we gave with the Spider-Man, analogy. But that doesn't mean that the events of what happened in that comic book actually happened. But we can learn about New York passively at the time from it. So he's going down this path of what feels like a weird, half-cocked version of hermeneutics, where he's saying,
yeah, that's weird because I was kind of thinking the same thing when I was talking to him, or when he was talking to us.
Yeah. And as I was watching it, so he says, hey, Peter means rock. Okay. So where does he go from there?
Knowing this, we can actually change whenever we see in the Bible the name Peter, we can replace with the church.
So Peter means rock. Rock means church. So Peter means church. So every time you see Peter, you can replace it with church.
Which I get what he's trying to do, but it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. It just absolutely doesn't. Now, I'll get into the prophecy part a little later.
My mind just went a really weird place with that one.
So the thing is you don't throw a Peter at somebody, you throw a rock.
Yes.
And the example...
You don't throw a church at somebody either.
No, exactly.
They're kind of heavy.
and V actually really gave a great example just like that. Oh.
I call my little sibling and I say, good morning, you are my sunshine, right? I call my little sibling my sunshine. Does that mean that every time anybody references my sibling, they mean literal sunshine?
Same thing.
Bingo. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You have these.
Yeah, they nailed it right there.
Exactly. Yeah. And I went back through and I looked up a couple of Bible quotes that I remember, and one of them was Matthew 8:14. When Jesus came into Peter's home, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. Okay. So when Jesus came into Rock's home, he saw his mother-in-law. I didn't know Rocks had mothers-in-laws. When Jesus came into the church's home, he saw the church's mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever.
Churches have mother-in-laws too now.
I'm so sorry.
So if two churches get married, where do they get married in?
Well, I think the in part comes after. Anyway, no, it's gonna get weird. So obviously, we're cherry picking here.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
they do it all the time. So we can do it once in a while.
Well, the thing is what he's saying is that every single place you see it, you should switch it out.
Right. Which is not the case.
Exactly. We just gave an example. And even one of the examples that he gave didn't make a lot of sense.
This is from Matthew 14:22-33, when Jesus told his disciples to get into a ship and go to the other side. And he sent the multitudes away. That itself in parable meaning was, that is to say that the body of believers would have to venture into the future without the tangible experience of Jesus' presence along the way.
You saw my face there, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, so leaving the prophecy part aside, because I said we're going to get to that after.
Sure.
Even in context, it doesn't make sense, right? If you go back to Matthew 14, I pulled up this. Peter said to him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. So the whole idea of Jesus leaving people to fend for themselves, even in the context that he gave, doesn't make sense. Because in the story, Peter's not left on shore. He walked on the fucking water.
Just like Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, we can replace that. The church said to him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. And the church got out of the boat and walked in the water, on the water, and came toward Jesus. So you've got to really go kind of deep to start seeing kind of the stuff that was getting pointed out. And I spent quite a while vetting more of this than I should have. It actually, Can I just share with you a couple of examples that I got here, just because I couldn't leave it alone?
Absolutely.
Cool. So I've got Matthew 16:23, and it's also said the same in Mark 8:23. Jesus rebukes Paul. He rebukes Peter. He turns and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." So let's contextualize that. He turned and said to the church, "Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me, for you're not setting your mind on God's interests, but man's." No. I actually, there are quite a few places, Matthew and Mark, that is a phrase Jesus has said before, "Get behind me, Satan." It's not the last time.
A few times, I think.
Yeah. In fact, every
time I hear someone scream that, I always look for someone to get behind.
Where's Aaron when you need him?
I can't tell you how many times I've been called Satan.
Right. Okay. So, moving on, you have Jesus right before getting crucified. Actually, wait, we didn't get into Jesus just yet. We have, no, we're good.
I thought we were still dealing with the whole Peter.
We're still dealing with Peter. That's right. You know what? Before I get too far in, this is supposed to be a 20-minute show, and we're at 22 minutes.
Oh, geez.
So I do want to give you something though here, and that is a clip of that call when he was asked, "Hey, where are you getting this stuff? Like, where did you find this?"
Some of this information I'm giving you is from an author named Robert C. Farrell, and you would have to listen to a video of his called "The Guidebook of the Elect."
Robert C. Farrell, The Guidebook of the Elect. Neil, that's over 4 hours of video. Neil,
who has that kind of time?
I watched over 4 hours of this.
Oh my. Man,
why? I don't because I don't want to be challenged again and be told, "No, Eric, you just haven't read it." Right. "No, Eric, you just haven't come across it." I want to share with you one of my favorite excerpts from that. It was a little after 3 hours in, where he I wish I was joking.
Wait that long to find a favorite?
So he very clearly describes what he's doing, and I think it's a good place to kind of leave things is this clip right here, because first off, he's going to be speaking a little fast. I did my best to correct the pitch so he didn't sound like a chipmunk, but I didn't want to play it for too long. Yeah. So here's the clip.
Moreover, this ability to bring the treasure out is predicated on one's being instructed unto the kingdom of heaven. In other words, there's a secret that one must know before one can decode it. Since one needs to have this instruction before one can understand, it is evident that the reader cannot simply deduce a conclusion merely from the facts given, but rather would have to bring this understanding to bear on the parable.
You know, one of the issues I've always had with this whole, the way he's just describing about the reader can't deduce blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. It says, why write a book like that to begin with? If it's the most important message for humankind, why would you write a book like that?
Exactly. If the key to understanding can't
or have someone write it for you.
Yeah. Or write a companion book. But if the key to salvation is a secret that you have to be told before you can understand it. You know, if you can't research this yourself, but somebody has to read you in, what kind of loving
really
God
bad idea?
Yeah.
Right.
So
it's Loftus talks about that in his book, actually.
Yeah, it does.
John W. Loftus. Yeah.
So what he's talking about here isn't just replacing names in kind of a pseudo hermeneutic way, though. He's taking that and then he's moving on and talking about prophecy and what was prophesied. And I want to talk about that, but we run out of time.
Well, you'll have to have me back on, won't you?
I will. How about we continue this conversation after I end this, and people can watch part 2 next week.
Sounds good to me.
All right, brother. Hang on just a second while I close this out. Let me see here. Actually, no. First, Neil, how can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at 604atheist. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Neil Bernstein on Facebook. I have a little spinning logo for my picture there, my profile picture. Trouth Mubble, sorry. And you can also find me on YouTube if you are interested in listening to some deconversion stories. And I've also spoken with actual cradle atheists and many others as well, coming out of all kinds of different belief systems. If you're interested in hearing about those sorts of things, you can find me on YouTube at Neil the 604 Atheist.
Awesome. Actually, in the next episode, I want to talk just a little bit about that. For those of you who haven't seen Neil's channel or seen Neil called in to Talk Heathen. That's the very first time that we talked to each other. And I adore the work that you do and the heart that you bring to this community. So if y'all are watching and you haven't subscribed to Neil, please do. Dude, I'll talk to you in a bit.
You bet.
All right, everybody. That was it for this episode. I know I kind of left on a cliffhanger, but we just don't have enough time to talk about prophecy. So we will get to it next week. I also just want to say after the fact, Neil, thank you so much for filling in. Jenna is busy at the moment. So you coming in at the last minute. This was recorded yesterday as you're watching this. So Neil, again, thank you so much. Click here to subscribe and get notifications for when I'm putting out new content. I put it out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I usually have episodes out early for patrons. So if you can't wait for the next episode, click here. You can go to my Patreon and get access to early episodes. If you want to watch Moon Madness, which is one of my favorite episodes that I've done so far, go ahead and click here. Bye, everybody.